Hello, everyone. Welcome once again to the Daily Fantasy Cafe podcast, the Cafe on Air. I'm your host, Big Italy 42. Once again, here with Spencer Limbach, Spencer_JL on Twitter. And what's going on today, man?
Not much. Just another day in the daily fantasy world. Looking forward to some of these contests tonight on FanDuel and DraftKings and all the other smaller sites too. So
Yeah, definitely. After last night's debacle, we were expecting big news all night, and then nothing really came up. So I know we were both lamenting it there right after 7 o'clock last night, how a bad slate turned even worse right before lock. So hopefully a better one.
it actually turned out decent for me. Once it was all said and done, I had a little bit of Ricky Rubio,
Yep.
which really helped me in some tournament spots, and a little bit of DeMar DeRozan.
Yeah.
So that definitely helped on a smaller slate as both those guys went off. But yeah, I mean the injury news was kind of spotty leading up to tip off. But I mean,
And that whole Golden State nonsense where we didn't know who was going to play, who's playing what minutes, and then Steph Curry getting in foul trouble for a little while. Definitely a rare occasion there. All right, we're going to go ahead and recap some things from last night, some things to note. You already mentioned DeMar DeRozan had a huge game, finally getting over his shooting woes. It looks like 12 of 24 last night, 35 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. So nice game for him. Also on the Toronto side, Lou Williams had himself a nice game off the bench, 21 and 5 with 3 rebounds. Patrick Patterson and Amir Johnson is a situation I like to avoid. I know that last night Patrick Patterson had himself a good game. I'm not buying too much into that still. Still something I like to stay away from. How about you?
yeah, I mean it's essentially a timeshare right now. They're splitting minutes pretty much right down the middle, and I mean sometimes Patterson will get more, sometimes he won't. He basically just rides the hot hand, and you never know who that's going to be on a night-to-night basis. So, I mean, when you don't know for daily fantasy, you usually just pivot elsewhere to more of a sure thing, and that's what I do in that situation.
Yeah, it seemed like those two are pretty much impossible to play in cash games. Really no floor for either one of them. You can predict it all. On the Philadelphia side, we had Nerlens Noel going perfect 7 for 7. Nice little stat sheet stuffer for him. 17 points, 7 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, and a block. Once again, Ish Smith outperforming Isaiah Canaan. 19 points, 9 assists, and 5 rebounds off the bench. So a guy you can definitely look at minimum, right around minimum salary around the industry. And Thomas Robinson. I don't know why I was going Terrence. 15 minutes, solid 15 minutes, but still just 15 minutes. So a guy that seemed to be trending upward of minutes, then kind of went back down. Decent production last night. I think it's a situation to look at, but not someone I'm going to invest heavily in right now. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you recall him with the Portland Trailblazers, he got a few spot starts here and there, and he was just one of the more frustrating plays.
Yeah.
Even when he saw the minutes. But I think that was more being a product of the system. In Portland, you never really knew what their rotation was. He has more opportunity here in Philadelphia. I mean, the minutes were trending up. Maybe it was an outlier, him getting 15 minutes tonight. But Philadelphia has some injuries up front. They're young, so it could be that he sees more playing time down the stretch, so definitely a situation to monitor.
Yeah, definitely a little bit of narrative there. He already mentioned he likes being at a place where he feels welcome, where they want him, and obviously that wasn't the case in Portland. We've seen starts, like you mentioned, he plays 6 minutes and then sits on the bench. So frustrating situation there, but definitely keep an eye on him at his price around the industry right now. Golden State and Brooklyn last night, really, really great game. Jarrett Jack with the game winner right at the buzzer. Klay Thompson was horrible, 3 out of 17, 7 points, 5 assists. Hopefully you didn't play him in your cash games last night, but I wouldn't blame you if you did. Stephen Curry got in some foul trouble, which is something rare as usual that we mentioned earlier. Just 29 minutes, but a solid 26 and 7 line. And one of my favorite plays recently. Tell me your thoughts on him. Andre Iguodala, once again, 30 minutes, 12 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals. He's been a great cash game play over the past couple weeks.
I know, and I've kind of missed the boat on him, and I'm wondering if it's too late. If everyone's on him, his price tag's starting to rise. But yeah, he's been a great return on investment the past 3 or 4 games.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't really know where it came from, because I mean he was playing the 6-man role pretty much all season. His minutes are essentially the same, if I'm not mistaken. He's just performing at a much higher clip. So I mean, maybe he's finding his role finally, or stepping up in the wake of Clay's had some down performances. So I don't know. Yeah, he's definitely someone to consider moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I know he was 3,900 last night on DraftKings. If he's anything near that again, next game, I'll definitely be on him once again.
Yep.
On the Brooklyn side, Darren Williams, not a great shooting night, but 22, 4, and 4 for him. A fine performance. Brook Lopez, 11 to 22, 26.6 rebounds. Still not a guy I'm going to be investing in much outside of the GPPs because too streaky of a shooter for me. I think we've talked about that before. I think you probably feel the same way with him.
Yeah, and he doesn't rebound for a 7-footer. And, I mean, you hate that because he has to make his shots. He takes a lot of jump shots for a big man, too. It's not like he's, doing hook shots and putbacks. So, I mean, yeah, definitely a GPP play. Someone who could go off, but, I mean, he could also churn out a 3 for 17 shooting performance.
Yeah, definitely a guy who's very scoring dependent, and I don't like playing those type of guys in my cash games. Phoenix and Miami last night, nice testy affair here. We saw Alex Len and Hassan Whiteside get both tossed for wrestling, and then I don't know if you saw Hassan Whiteside's quote. They asked him what happened. He said, "I just kept dunking on him," which I thought was an awesome quote, as usual.
He speaks the truth. I mean... that's kind of how it went.
Yeah, exactly. And then Markieff Morris got tossed as well. We saw some pretty good performances. Saw that Goran Dragic, only the second player in the last decade to score 21 or more points in 15 or less minutes. So other player, surprisingly, being Kyle Lowry, not necessarily a name we'd assume would be there. Tyler Johnson went off for the Heat off the bench, 26 minutes. He was 10 for 13 from the field, so obviously not something you expect to happen again, but 26 points, 4 steals. He had a nice little performance there.
So, yeah, I didn't catch the entire situation. Maybe you can fill me in. What exactly happened with Goran Dragic in his minutes being limited like that?
I guess he had I didn't see the game. I heard that he got fouled hard, and then he landed awkwardly. So it seems
Yeah, I didn't see anything come up in the injury report, and so I was looking back on that and kind of wondering. But yeah, I mean that makes sense.
Yeah, that's what I saw. I mean, it seemed like from what I read that if it were any team but his old team, that a little trash talk back and forth, that he probably would have gone ahead and sat out the back spasms. Hopefully, they didn't just let him get hurt worse by letting him fall like that. But at least he produced while he was in there. PJ Tucker was the big bright spot for the Suns there. 20 points, 14 rebounds, and 3 assists. Obviously, a little bit of that because Markieff Morris got tossed, I believe, in the third quarter. Yep. And Eric Bledsoe, 20 points, 4 rebounds, 3 assists. A fine stat line, but nowhere near paying off his huge salary that he has right now. So anything short of a game against, I don't know, the Warriors, the Clippers, something in a 215, 218 kind of total, he's pretty out of play for me, especially in cash games at his price. How about you?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, a lot of people really like him without Isaiah Thomas and Goran Dragic in the mix there in Phoenix, but I mean, it's getting to the point, like you said, you really have to be price sensitive. And, I mean, Brandon Knight is going to demand some touches. So, I mean, you have to be aware of that, too. It's not like he's the only man in the backcourt there. But, I mean, certainly a good play, high upside play when the matchup is right. But, yeah, definitely be price sensitive.
Absolutely. Yeah, another game we got here, the Clippers at Minnesota. We saw some really nice performances here. Ricky Rubio with, I believe it was his 4th career, triple-double, 18, 12, and 11. Shot just 5 for 11. Solid shooting performance. We know Ricky Rubio doesn't take a lot of shots, but like you mentioned earlier, if you had him, especially in some tournaments, you had quite a nice night. The real bright spot outside of him was Gary Neal, filling in for Kevin Martin, who was hurt. Or I believe he was sick. I don't know exactly.
Yeah, he had an illness.
Yeah.
Yep.
But just 6 for 17, but career-high 9 rebounds with 19 points and 4 assists. So if he ends up getting another start there, definitely a huge value play. He was right around minimum salary last night. I didn't have enough of him as I wish I had, but definitely a guy to look forward towards the next game. DeAndre Jordan, of course, 12 and 18, pretty much what you expect out of him. Chris Paul, 26 and 14, 3 steals, what you expect out of him. And injury note here, Jamal Crawford did leave this game, I believe, after 11 minutes. Think of baseball already.
Already on baseball. It's about a month away.
Hey, it's getting close. Spring training coming up. But, yeah, he left with an injury, so monitor that moving forward. J.J. Redick was ejected, but that's not something you need to worry too much about moving forward. Anything else you saw in this game that you wanted to touch on?
Nothing really. I mean, back to the Ricky Rubio thing. I mean, I just can't get enough of talking about Ricky Rubio because, I mean, well, the Wolves are my favorite team, and he's been playing awesome as of late. I mean, this is the best I've seen him play in his professional career. I mean, part of that probably has to do with not having Kevin Love there, where he just feeds him the ball and just kind of stands there and watches. He's actually rebounding the ball, getting out on the break, and just making things happen, as you saw last night.
Yeah.
So, I mean, yeah, he's definitely someone to target.
Yeah, and I'm with you there. Ricky Rubio, one of my favorite players in the league. I'm not a Wolves fan. I just absolutely love Ricky Rubio. I remember watching his highlights when he was young. The kid is tremendously talented. I'm glad to see him being successful in the NBA because we had to wait quite a while for him to get up
Yeah.
there. One more game from last night, New Orleans at Dallas. Not a lot of great performance in this one. We saw kind of an odd line from Rajon Rondo there. Took 15 shots. Surprisingly, Dirk Nowitzki only 13 shots. Rondo with just 2 assists but 19 points. So definitely an anomaly of a performance there. Still not a guy I'm going to be looking at in any format. Is he a guy you're going to be targeting in any way?
Absolutely not. I mean, his price is way down, but like you said, 2 assists last night, and he took 14 shots. I mean, that's not his game.
Yeah.
And, I mean, you can't expect him to repeat that anytime soon. I mean, it's definitely an anomaly,
Yeah.
and I really wouldn't put too much stock in it moving forward.
No, I wouldn't either. And it doesn't make any sense to me. From my perspective, Rondo, one of the best passers in the entire league. So plenty of guys who can shoot. I know that they're missing Tyson Chandler, Chandler Parsons. No excuse for me. If I'm Rajon Rondo, you're there to dish the ball. You're not there to score. So
Yeah.
definitely a strange little line there. Another guy here, Dante Cunningham's been a nice cash game play recently. He was 3,400 last night on DraftKings. Surprisingly, took 15 shots. Didn't have a great line, but 12 points, 4 rebounds, and assists and a block was more than enough to pay out that tag for cash games. Alexia Ajinka, I believe it said. I don't know. I've heard some different pronunciations there. 13 and 12. So,
Yeah.
I mean, only 25 minutes. We know he's the low 20s minutes kind of guy, so a little bit risky for your cash games. But he's a guy to look at in tournaments. You've been playing him a little bit?
I mean, yeah, I have. I played him especially on draft day. His price is a lot cheaper over there. I think it's like 6.3K, which at a $100,000 salary cap, that's really cheap.
Yeah.
But the problem I have with him on DraftKings and FanDuel is that he's priced pretty much the same as a guy like Omar Ashik or Alex Len or guys like that, and they're getting a lot more minutes. So, I mean, yeah, he has upside, but the playing time really kind of curbs my enthusiasm for him, especially in an expanded slate.
Yeah, and even last night, like you mentioned, Len around the same price, and then even Gorgie Jang, when Pekovic was listed out, was right around that price as well. So definitely, if you were playing him in cash games last night, you probably missed out on some points elsewhere. Before we get into tonight's breakdown, I want to talk a little bit about a couple DraftKings contests. We've got some unique contests going on today. The Crazy Eights, an $8 buy-in. No surprise that the prize pool $88,888. So if you like a nice little interesting new wrinkle there, maybe enter that one. There's $5 satellites for the main event coming up on Friday. $100,000 to first place, and that on Friday. There's a mega triple up. It's $3. They're bringing back the $3 sharpshooter once again. Smaller prize pool, not quite as many entries. I believe it overlaid a little bit last night. And the crossover going back and forth from 20 to 27, back to 20 tonight. But $100,000 up for grabs in that one. So if you're looking at DraftKings, we're going to get into some pricing, some salaries here. Those are some good contests for you to be looking at tonight.
Yeah, I love the crossover. I play that pretty much nightly, fire up multiple entries in that, try and hit the big prize. But
yeah,
haven't hit the big one yet, but, I'm still trying.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's coming. I mean, last night, my best, I had a team with Rubio, DeRozan, and Chris Paul. Ended up being it was right around top 10 in the sharpshooter, but ended up being I think about 40th. So it's really hard. You got to get pretty lucky to get that top score there as well. So
yeah,
but definitely throw a bunch of entries in that. They're nice, cheap ways to get yourself some money. First game we got going on in tonight's slate, 7-game slate, is the Lakers at Charlotte. Charlotte, an 8-point favorite, 193-point total, which seems low, but there's actually quite a few low spreads tonight, so this is one of the higher ones, surprisingly. You're looking at finally an increased price tag for Mo Williams up to $7,000. Obviously, a great matchup. Lakers terrible against point guards. Not sure that he's cash game playable for me anymore at that price, but certainly a guy you want to look at in tournaments. He's got huge upside. Are you considering him at all in your cash games tonight?
I might if he fits. I mean, I'm going to be happy with it. But like you said, the price is jacked up on DraftKings. I think he's a better play on FanDuel, where he's sitting at 6.6K. And you have guys like Isaiah Thomas sitting above that at 6.9K, which on DraftKings, they're pretty much the exact opposite. Thomas is lower at 6.2K. So I'm probably going to be price sensitive with those guys. So ultimately makes Mo Williams a better play on FanDuel.
Yeah, and I agree. And I think that's a big key, something we're going over once again. Different pricing, different sites. I mean, just because someone's a good play doesn't mean you can't get better value on a different site. So definitely with you there. Michael Kidd-Gilchrist, 6,100 is kind of an expensive price on DraftKings, but 3 straight games over 31 fantasy points, 3 straight double-doubles, so obviously getting the bonus there. I think he's not a bad cash game play at a weak small forward position tonight, but I'm not going to go out of my way to put him in there. And Big Al Jefferson's still underpriced on DraftKings as well. 7,800 coming off a really big performance last time out. And we know these Lakers bigs, really the Lakers everything, that pretty terrible defensively. So Big Al's going to be one of my favorite targets at center. How about you?
Yeah, I really like him. Once again, you're kind of running into a pricing situation, whether he fits into your lineup or not. I mean, really good price tag for him, but I mean, it just really depends on lineup configuration, which route you're going to go. There's certainly enough cheap plays to complement him in a solid cash game roster, so I think he's a fine selection.
Yeah, definitely. On the Lakers side, obviously more value. The flavor of the week right now, as we've seen before, Jeremy Lin, 4,100. Some big performances his last 4 games, 45.5, 29.75, 19, and 36. Obviously not a guy I'm going to go too heavily into, but he's playing really well off the bench, a bench that's pretty incapable of scoring outside of him. So I think he's definitely worth a look in some tournaments. And at that cheap price tag tonight, I mean, you've got guys like Andre Miller and Ray McCallum right around there you could use for cash games, but I wouldn't be opposed to throwing Jeremy Lin in there the way he's playing. Am I crazy there?
You know, everything you said is true, but I just can't bring myself to do it. I don't know why. I don't know if I have a bias against him because, you know, he can be really bad sometimes. And just watching him, it can be painful sometimes.
Yeah.
But, I mean, 4.1K on DraftKings, I mean, if you're looking at a second guard or utility spot where you just need someone in that price range, he's a high upside pick to go with. So, I mean, yeah, you're definitely not crazy in that line of thinking. But I just don't think I personally am going to go that route tonight.
Yeah, and I don't blame you there. I mean, matchups there. Mo Williams, not much of a defender. Neither's Brian Roberts. But, yeah, definitely some inherent risk there. So probably more reserved for GPPs there. Jordan Clarkson, 4,700, a guy that's been playing well. His minutes have kind of fluctuated a little bit, so I think he's out of cash game play for me as well. Wayne Ellington's the guy I like quite a bit. 4,700. He has 3 straight games of over 30 fantasy points. Been playing huge minutes, mid to upper 30s. So I think he's definitely a guy that's in play for cash games. Not a terrible tournament play either, with seemingly decent upside as well at that price tag.
Yeah, he's definitely on my radar tonight. And looking at these salary comparisons, he looks like a better play on DraftKings, sitting at 4.7K. He's 5.5K on FanDuel. I think he's in play there, but not necessarily a must. One thing to monitor with him is looking at Nick Young's situation. I mean, he's questionable with an injury tonight. If he's out, obviously it's going to be all systems go for Ellington. But if Nick Young's in, he might eat into his production slightly. I mean, I wouldn't be too worried about it. I mean, he has proven in the past that they can coexist and both put up fantasy points. But just something to be aware of.
Yeah, definitely. And Nick Young, as we know, likes to take a lot of shots. He thinks he's the best three-point shooter in the league, which is insanity to me. But, I mean, that's a different argument for a different day, I guess.
Yeah, telling Kobe that no one can guard him. So
which is hilarious, as Kobe, who, when healthy and in his prime, literally could not be guarded. So
yeah,
obviously pretty funny. And I'm sure you saw that celebration after the game the other day. Kobe was not happy about that. Did you see that on Jimmy Kimmel?
Yeah.
That was hilarious. And then Byron Scott had to chime in with, "Oh, I felt the same way." Like, no, you didn't. You just don't want Kobe to be mad at you.
Yeah.
Next up, we have Boston at Cleveland. Biggest total on the night, but also the biggest point spread. 11-point favorite for Cleveland. 209-point total. They're expecting Kyrie Irving to be back for this one. He's got a really cheap price tag on DraftKings, 7,600. I'm a little leery of playing him too much, obviously coming off an injury. Still no confirmation for sure that he'll play it at this point in the day. But definitely a guy to consider in your tournaments if you hear that he's all systems go, ready to play full complement of minutes.
Yeah, I mean, definitely keep an eye on that situation. I was just looking before we went on air at the beat writers on Twitter, and originally it said he will play, but now he's listed as officially questionable. So keep an eye on that. And yeah, he's a tournament play if he's all systems go. But other than that, I'll probably drop down to value at point guard.
Yeah, I agree. And if he doesn't play, I don't think we need to tell you to play LeBron James. 10,400 coming off of over 70 and then over 60 fantasy points his last two. 100% chance he will be in my lineups if Kyrie Irving doesn't play tonight.
Yeah, that, and you have to also consider that Kevin Love missed shoot-around this morning with an illness. So, I mean, he's still probable to play, but we don't know how effective he'll be, and maybe he'll be deferring more production to LeBron James.
Yeah, and definitely if Kevin Love is limited in any fashion, you're going to be looking once again at Tristan Thompson coming off a huge game. 14-19 last game, 4,200. So once again, obviously you want to target this game with the high total, and if Love and or Irving end up sitting or being limited, LeBron and Tristan Thompson all over the place for me.
And J.R. Smith, if Irving's out too, more shots will go his way.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially DraftKings with a 3-point bonus makes him a nice play there at 5.6K.
Yep.
On the Boston end, you're obviously looking at Isaiah Thomas. We talked about it last week when we were on together. His price is fair, right around 6K. It's at 6.2 tonight. You mentioned higher on FanDuel. He's still getting just under 30 minutes a game, which is a little bit concerning, but he's been incredibly productive throughout his time. So, I mean, definitely a guy you're going to be considering tonight, regardless of him coming off the bench, right?
You know, yeah, I wish I saved this tweet, but I saw last night when I was looking through the beat writers, someone tweeted out that his usage rate is comparable to like Stephen Curry and LeBron James for the season when Thomas is with the Celtics.
Yeah.
I know it. Yeah, I know it's a small sample size, like 5 or 6 games, but I mean, that definitely says something, especially looking at him at that price tag. I'm definitely targeting him at DraftKings, where he's cheaper than Mo Williams, as we mentioned before. But I mean, yeah, lower minutes, don't be worried about it. He's still getting the usage.
Yeah, and I mean, like you mentioned with the usage, I mean, last 2 games, 31 minutes, 22 shots, 29 minutes, 21 shots. So not a lot of offense off the bench there for the Celtics, which seems to be the reason why Brad Stevens is still bringing him off the bench. So definitely the volume will be there. So not a concern for me that he'll get opportunity. Only other guys I'm really looking at in this one for Boston, chime in if you got anyone else. Brandon Bass, 5,200, obviously. Kevin Love, a bad defender. Tristan Thompson, not much better, a little bit longer. Jay Crowder's been playing pretty well, 4.9K. Obviously, he's not going to have 17 rebounds again like he did last game, but nobody else I'm really looking at for Boston. Anybody else catching your eye here?
Not really, but if you're looking at the front court, I'm really not tonight because I think Bass and Zeller are priced fairly with Olynyk out, but just scanning over the injury report, Kelly Olynyk is questionable. He said he's going to test it out and warm up and see if he's a go. So, I mean, if you're looking at the Boston front court, that may even cut into Jake Crowder's production because I know the Celtics were going a lot smaller with Olynyk out. So, I mean, look at those headlines and see what Olynyk's status is heading into the game and kind of make a determination from there.
Yeah, and that's a great point because the Cavs, as we've seen, can go small as well. Putting Tristan Thompson in there at the 5 and could definitely see some mismatches there. So keep an eye on that moving forward tonight. Also, next coming up, we have Sacramento at the New York Knicks. A 2.5-point favorite for Sacramento. No surprise, though, when you realize that DeMarcus Cousins' last note that I saw was doubtful. I assume he's not going to play tonight. I don't know if you've seen any updates on that. But
I have not.
Yeah, we can assume that he's not going to play. Not a meaningful game for the Kings, and why risk your best player future when you've already got Darren Collison out? So I say we err on the side of assuming he's not going to play, which makes this first play an obvious play. Once again, Rudy Gay, much higher usage without Collison and DeMarcus Cousins in. 7,700 on DraftKings will be pretty much the popular play there at small forward tonight. Are you opposed to that at all, or is it just a pretty much no-brainer as well?
I'm definitely with Rudy Gay, especially on FanDuel. He's 7.6K. I mean, which in comparison is better per dollar pick than DraftKings at 7.7K. But I kind of touted him on Friday's show, and he really didn't do that much with Cousins out. But I mean, much different story against the Knicks here today. I mean, he was playing San Antonio on Friday. It's a tough matchup.
Yeah.
Kawhi Leonard was able to frustrate him a little bit, even though he did get some shots up. Different story tonight against the Knicks. I mean, looks like a great play.
Yeah, absolutely. And we saw only 1 assist from Rudy Gay in that game and 10 from Andre Miller. I'm not assuming that Andre Miller is going to be putting up 10 assists again, so maybe Gay gets a little bit more involved as the facilitator again tonight.
Yeah.
Obviously, already mentioned McCallum, Andre Miller, both cheap guys, both splitting minutes. You want to go one of those 2 routes, I don't blame you. Neither one really much better than the other. Neither one seems to have a higher floor or a higher ceiling, so go with the cheaper guy on my end.
Yep, exactly. One thing from this game, what do you think of Jason Thompson? I mean, we don't really know what to expect. He's had some great games, some 30-plus, 35 fantasy point games with DeMarcus Cousins out, but then he kind of threw up a dud last time.
Yeah, well, I have him written down as well. He's 4.1 on DraftKings, so he was the guy I was also considering, but I had him I'm a little bitter right now, trying not to use the recency bias, but I did have him in my cash games on last game out, and it was foul trouble, though. So he did foul out in 18 minutes, which is just awful, and I don't think he scored a single point, if I remember correctly. So I think he's definitely still in play. He's played well with Cousins out, so I think he's a good tournament guy to target that people will be off of just noticing the game log and not realizing that he was struggling with foul trouble the whole game.
Yeah, I think you can be fairly confident with him because, I mean, you look at these previous outings, he had 33 minutes, 33 fantasy points against Memphis. And, I mean, if foul trouble wasn't holding him back, he was on pace to hit value against Portland last game. And Knicks don't rebound the ball well, and they really don't pose much of a threat in drawing fouls in the interior. Because, I mean, Andrea Bargnani, he's just going to be chucking from 12, 15 feet away. I mean, if you look at it that way, there's some rationale in using Jason Thompson tonight. I mean, I wouldn't go all in with him, but don't overlook him.
Yeah, and I think that's really solid reasoning, especially the lack of foul drawings. No big men in there they're going to dominate and get him in any sort of trouble. So, yeah, I mean, like you said, don't expect huge things, but definitely a guy that could pay off that cheap salary really nice. Not looking at a whole lot of other guys. Obviously, Bargnani still maybe a popular play. He's up at 4.5K now, so obviously just a tournament play at this point. I'm not going too crazy about it. He's still Andrea Bargnani, who has let down everyone in the entire world until last week. So not going crazy there. You could look at Langston Galloway at 4.9 if you want a cheap point guard, but not for cash games for me.
All right, I'm going to put you on the spot here. Cheap power forward, gun to your head, you have to pick one. Ersan Ilyasova, Andrea Bargnani, or Jason Thompson.
It's got to be
Assuming
Thompson.
the same price. Assuming the same price.
I'm going Thompson.
Okay.
Bargnani, I still don't trust. Thompson, we've seen the fact that he's produced without DeMarcus Cousins in. Yeah, it's got to be Thompson for me.
Agreed. Yep.
All right, good. Glad we're on the same page with that one. Couple more games here. Next one, Houston at Atlanta. This one's going to get really interesting. James Harden is suspended for his little kick in the groin of LeBron James, whether intentional or non-intentional. He can lie about it all he wants. He obviously meant to do what he did there. Paying the price there. I saw some people mad that he was suspended. A little ridiculous on my ends. I think it was a pretty cut and dry suspension there.
All right, here's where the people start disputing it. They're asking if it was anyone but LeBron James, would he be suspended? If he kicked Matthew Dellavedova in the groin, would Harden be suspended? Is the question.
If he kicks at that same level on Dellavedova, he probably hits him in the knee. So.
Yeah, that's very true. Okay, Tristan Thompson then.
Yeah, and that's a good point because I'm with you there. It's could be the whole protecting LeBron thing because we did see. I watched that whole game. It was a great game. LeBron was jawing at the refs a whole bunch, Kobe style, like he likes to do sometimes. And LeBron was the aggressor quite a bit because we saw him get into it with Patrick Beverley. Also, they gave double technicals there. I'm not sure exactly what Beverley did on that play. It looked to me like LeBron held him down. But
Patrick Beverley gets into it with everyone.
Oh yeah, I mean he
instigates. Tries to get in their mind.
Yeah, Beverly's that kid in the playground that picks fights with the kids that aren't talking to anybody. And
yeah.
Still, he probably still does that.
Yeah.
So
he just goes outside of his apartment to a pickup game and just starts jawing at kids.
Yeah, absolutely. So he definitely the kind of guy that could get in a fight at a grocery store. So I'm not surprised there. But with James Harden out, obviously an enormous amount of usage going around. I was looking at some numbers earlier. Corey Brewer has a huge usage rate with Dwight Howard and James Harden out, 28.3%. Obviously not huge compared to guys like Russell Westbrook, but for a guy that's $4,000 tonight, he's got is going to shoot a lot. We've seen it before. Even last year had a 50 actual points game. A couple huge games this year as well. with James Harden out, I will be playing a ton of Corey Brewer at a weak shooting guard position. How about you?
Yeah, I agree with you. Yes, he's shooting guard eligible on DraftKings and small forward on FanDuel. So, I mean, yeah, I mean, both positions are relatively scarce. There's more depth at small forward tonight, but I mean, you have to roster two of those on FanDuel. So I think he's a great small forward, second small forward for your lineup. So yeah, I mean, the question I'm asking myself is not if to roster Corey Brewer, it's how much really.
Yeah,
And
that's what
and
scares
and
me.
I was reading beat writers earlier, and they said Kevin McHale would not comment on who is replacing James Harden in the starting lineup. So I don't know if we're gonna get any development as the day goes on. But I mean, you have to figure Brewer's going to be in the mix, right? I mean, they're just not going to hand Jason Terry the ball and they're going to say do James Harden's thing. I mean,
Yeah. I mean, my only thought would be maybe he puts Terry in the starting lineup and leaves Brewer as just kind of spark off the bench.
yeah.
I could see that, I guess, but in all reality, I mean, it's a tough matchup against Atlanta anyway. Jason Terry, pretty much just a three-point shooter at this point. Can't create a whole lot of his own shots. Never really could that well. So it's going to be tough to see. But I think, honestly, even if Terry ends up being in the starting lineup, Brewer off the bench, that's not going to scare me off playing Brewer. I think he's still going to probably take the most shots on the team. He's going to be running the point quite a bit, especially if Patrick Beverley's not in with him. And, I mean, Beverley not necessarily a traditional point guard anyway. So I'm still a big fan of Brewer there, even if McHale's trying to pull a Brian Shaw on us right now.
Mm-hmm. And then with the Harden injury, how much does that bump up guys like Josh Smith, Terrence Jones, etc.?
I'm glad you asked that because Josh Smith's actually second behind Brewer at 27.8%. So he's got a pretty nice usage. Obviously, his price quite a bit higher, 6.5K on DraftKings. So he's a guy you want to consider also.
Yes, he is a small forward on DraftKings. He's a power forward on FanDuel. Terrence Jones's price is pretty high on DraftKings. I mean, I'm still looking at him, but I'm not gonna, bend over backwards to fit him in just because I think he's priced more than appropriately there. He's 6.5K on FanDuel, a little better price there, and I mean, yeah, I mean, you could really definitely go that route on FanDuel, I'm thinking.
Yeah, and then my thought there is, I mean, obviously he's in play, but 7K, like you mentioned, DraftKings, kind of prohibitive there a little bit. You could look at Donatas Motiejunas, 4,900. Neither one in a great matchup, though. Obviously, we know Atlanta pretty tough down low. Only thing they don't really have is size, though. So Al Horford pretty undersized for a center, and Millsap, I guess about average, maybe a little undersized for a power forward as well. So Terrence Jones, if he could stay out of foul trouble against those two who are pretty solid on the offensive end, I think he could be in a line for a pretty nice night despite the price tag because he does have a little bit of an athleticism advantage there.
There's a couple things I really like with Demo tonight. I mean, he's a lot cheaper than Smith or Terrence Jones. His recent production is kind of meh compared to those guys, so I don't think a lot of people are going to be targeting him, and I think that's a great opportunity for a cheaper price. I mean, he could post a similar stat line to Jones or Smith for a cheaper price tag and allow you to reach up elsewhere, so don't write him off, basically what I'm saying.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be interesting to see. I mean, if he plays at the 3, tough matchup against Damari Carroll, but also he's going to have a size advantage. Or if he plays at the 4, he can stretch out the floor, which is not something that Paul Millsap's usually used to doing that often. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's going to be interesting to see how McHale goes about that. But I'm with you there. Motiejunas definitely the sneaky play there at significantly cheaper.
Yep.
Next up, Utah at Memphis. This one's pretty gross. 182-point total, -8 for Memphis. We saw Utah actually, since the trade deadline, #1 in defensive efficiency. We know how good Memphis is against every position except for shooting guard. The only things I'm looking at, both in tournaments here, Trey Burke has been playing incredible right now. I hate to say it. 4.5K. Yeah, I didn't notice it either. I saw his logs this morning. Check out these. 38.5 and 39.75 in his last 2 on DraftKings.
And he's still off the bench.
That is which could be interesting if playing against the Memphis bench players. Certainly not a cash game play, so do not get crazy and do that. But he is playing well. He's fitting well off the bench. He's shooting the ball well finally after struggling all year. So I could see him Derek Favors maybe in a GPP 7.4K. He's been hitting 40 the last 2 games. But on the Memphis end, you know the value's pretty concentrated, but you've got Gasol against the best rim protector in the league, Rudy Gobert. You've got Derek Favors, who isn't a good defender, but Zach Randolph's price fairly high. I could see Mike Conley. He's in a good matchup. You could maybe play him, but outside of that, this game's a fade for me.
Mike Conley, I mean, we talked about him on Friday. He kind of burned me a little bit. I liked him as a sneaky tournament pick. He's playing through injury right now, from what I've read. And the matchup isn't great. There's other point guards in a similar price range. Mo Williams, Isaiah Thomas. I mean, they're a little bit higher on the scale, but I'd rather, shell out an extra $500 of cap space and have more safety and security with that pick. As far as Derek Favors goes, like you said, tournament only option. But of that range, you're looking at Zach Randolph, Favors, and Millsap, and I'll probably give the nod to Millsap if I had to choose in that price range, or maybe even dip down to Josh Smith or Terrence Jones. So,
yep.
One more guy. Did you mention Rudy Gobert?
I mentioned him, but
okay.
Not, as a defender, not as a play. You like him?
I kind of do. I mean, just because center position's really scarce. I mean, his production isn't really derived from matchups. So, I mean, he doesn't need a great matchup to post a double-double and get a few blocks. I mean, if you want to look at it that way, granted, the upside is very limited in a pretty crappy matchup. But, I think if he fits, you can fit him in. He's a safe pick still. Otherwise, obviously, you can pivot downward a little bit and go cheaper or reach up to Al Jefferson. Really depends on your lineup construction for the night. But I'd keep him on the short list at center.
Yeah, and I think that's a solid point, too, because you mentioned him being able to hit value without having to score. And, on a 182-point total, you don't want too much exposure. But a guy like Gobert, he gets 4 or 5 blocks, maybe a steal or 2, 10 rebounds, and he's getting close to his value threshold without scoring much. So I think that's a great point.
What's his salary on DraftKings? I don't think I have it.
It's 6.7. Let me check here.
Okay, that's a little bit higher. He's 6.4K on FanDuel, which puts him under the average roster spot of 6,600. He's obviously above the average roster spot, which is 6.25 on DraftKings. So, a little bit of price sensitivity going on there. But, you can look at it that way.
Yeah, and definitely, there's a lot of centers with upside tonight, not a lot with great floors, I'd say. Mm-hmm. So, he's certainly in play.
Yeah.
Moving on to a game where we actually do have a couple center options. Washington at Chicago. Bulls getting the short end of the stick right now. Derrick Rose is out. Now Jimmy Butler is out for a couple weeks. Taj Gibson's out for a week. Pau Gasol, Thibodeau said last game was really sick, which made sense for why he played so poorly. I assume he's probably feeling a little bit better by now, but not sure I want to pay his tag of almost $10,000 tonight. You're looking at a couple guys here. Number one play, most popular play of the night is going to be Nikola Mirotic, I would guess. 4.4K. He was phenomenal last game. He's played great when given 30-plus minutes. He's been at 42 fantasy points 2 times in a row when given those big minutes. So are you all in on Mirotic tonight?
I hate using the term all in. Because I'm just one of those players that really likes to play different lineups, spread out the risk, different lineups and tournaments, gain more exposure. But yeah, if there's someone to call a close to must play, he's the guy. Matchup isn't great, but I think you really have a lot of outs with him tonight. His price tag's still cheap. He's a guy who can shoot from the outside. They're going to need him to rebound. He can play the 4 spot with Taj Gibson out, and he can also slide into the 3 with Jimmy Butler out. So I think he's going to see enough playing time to really be a solid return on investment.
Yeah, I agree there. And if you've got him playing at the 4, good luck having Nene, Chris Humphries, any of those guys chasing out of the 3-point line. That's a huge mismatch.
That's probably another point to make in general is I know a lot of people get hung up on defensive efficiency, but you really have to acknowledge the type of player they're defending against and how they profile. I mean, like you said, Mirotic running around on the outside, chucking up threes, getting jumpers, being extremely active. Nene really doesn't match up with him well at all. So, I mean, even though Washington profiles well against power forwards, it's still a respectable matchup. I mean, not something to really be 100% concerned with.
Yeah, I'm with you there. I mean, I think it's good reasoning. It makes sense if he's stretching the floor. If nothing else, it's going to give him better opportunities to hit jumpers and open up some rebounds for guys like Joakim Noah, who I like quite a bit tonight as well. 7,000. We've seen him before. I mean, he's looking more and more like the Joakim Noah we saw last year. That with injuries, once again at that point, I mean, he was a triple-double threat every night, and he's showing some great consistency right now. And another one of those guys who doesn't have to score or even shoot to produce value. I mean, you look at his last 4 games, 8, 16, and 2, 4, 11, and 8, 11, 12, and 8, 13, 11, and 6. And, I mean, most of those games came with Jimmy Butler still in the lineup. So I know a lot of people think Pau Gasol is going to have the offense run through him, and it will sometimes. But I think that Noah's going under the radar here because you've seen him run the offense even at the top of the key at times. So I think that Noah's definitely a sneaky pick that could have a huge, huge ceiling tonight.
Would you say he is obviously he's cash game playable, but would you go that route? Looking at DraftKings, he is 7K. Al Jefferson 7.8K. Rudy Gobert 6.7 and Gortat 5.7. Would you play him in a cash game on DraftKings?
It's looking like for me, and on DraftKings for cash games, it's going to be either him or Gortat that you just mentioned at 5.7 because Noah, a fine defender, but not a great rim protector. Neither is Pau Gasol. So I think Gortat especially, he's ramping up his rebounds recently. We've seen, I believe, 3 straight double-digit games. So I think it's one of those two for me. I mean, other guys obviously in tournaments, but I'm looking at it this way. You got a 1.5-point spread here with key pieces missing in this offense. We've seen Noah produce in this situation before. It's no surprise there. Whereas with Al Jefferson, other guys that can score, and they're 8-point favorites against a terrible Lakers team. So that game gets out of hand. Al Jefferson's first guy that's going to sit.
Yeah, I mean, that's a great way to look at it. And also speaking to Marcin Gortat's point, Chris Humphries is out, and he's without a timetable to return, so that kind of shortens up their front court rotation. You see he's been getting a lot more minutes than a season average after the All-Star break. He's hitting about 35-plus, in a normal complement. So he's a guy who's very safe pick to double-double, I mean, regardless of a, seemingly average matchup.
Yeah, and especially with that double-double bonus on DraftKings. And I still think it's somewhat of a misconception that the Bulls are a great defensive team because we haven't really seen it that much this year. And they've been pretty soft down low. If you look at some of the recent game logs, some guys have had their way with him. And obviously, Gortat, not the most athletic guy, but a great rebounder. I mean, he doesn't make mistakes. So
yeah, I think they're really trying to push the pace more this year. And it's shown because they've been kind of lagging in the defensive department. Yeah. And I think they're actually below average at defending the center position.
I think so.
If I'm not mistaken, in terms of raw defensive efficiency. So, I mean, yeah, Gortat's still cheap and great pick.
Yeah, I agree. And a couple other guys I want to touch on here. Bradley Beal, kind of thought he would get some limited minutes on his time back. Played over 30 minutes. He's 5.5K. So if you look at his game log from that one, it's actually not a very good log. But if you look at it, I mean, he scored 8 actual points, shot just 2 for 10, but managed 28.5 fantasy points on DraftKings. So, I mean, he's a guy that can kind of do it all. He's kind of an under-the-radar guy. And you saw, when healthy, I mean, each of his last 3 games for injury, 32, 37, and 40 fantasy points. So he's a guy that could crush that price tag. I mean, he was mid-6K for most of this year. I think he's a nice value play tonight against a Bulls team now missing their best defender who coincidentally plays shooting guard.
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to say tournament only just because, God, you never really know what he's going to do on a night-to-night basis. I mean, sometimes he'll have 13 rebounds. Sometimes he'll have 1. I mean, in that case, when he gets 1 rebound, he's very scoring dependent. And like you saw last night, he went 2 for 10 from the field. So, I mean, the price tag is there. He's cheap. He's probably not going to be this cheap moving forward. So you can look at it that way. But I think looking at shooting guard, I'm probably going to go with a guy like Corey Brewer or maybe dip down to Wayne Ellington if Nick Young is out. But yeah, he's on a tournament radar.
Yeah, agree. He's a guy that has burned people a lot more than he's helped people. So I understand the hesitation. I've got that as well. I had to get your thoughts on that one. One other guy, a guy that's usually kind of a risk to sit after playing big minutes. Paul Pierce, first time in about over a month that he had played over 30 minutes last game. 4.3K on DraftKings, really cheap for a guy who has over 30 fantasy points in back-to-back games. I don't expect that he'll sit, especially with Chris Humphries being out. They've got some injuries. What are your thoughts on him? I know he's obviously not a cash game play, but I think at 4.3K he's got significant upside there for a tournament.
Yeah, and they tend to play him a lot more in close games or bigger matchups, and this definitely profiles as such. Yeah, I mean, why did he sit? He had looking like he had a knee issue that
did not play old.
Yeah, basically, body being worn down.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's someone to consider in that range just because I really don't see anyone else in that area. So I mean, if you're clicking people into your lineup, you love your roster, you're looking for a small forward in the 4.5K, 4.3 range, he's a guy to consider.
Yeah, and I think I'd probably play myself against Mike Dunleavy as well. So matchup obviously pretty nice also. One last game here. Not a lot that I want involved in with this one. Milwaukee at Denver. Milwaukee a 5.5 point favorite, 192 point total. I'll give you my breakdown here real quick, and then you can chime in with anything. I like Will Barton at 3.8K. Seems like the only consistent player on Denver's roster that's actually scoring, actually getting consistent minutes. I don't really want much to do with Danilo Gallinari versus Wilson Chandler. They're pretty much the same player. Not much ceiling for either of those guys. Decent floors. Not touching the big men. I like the alphabet, but his price is way, way too high on DraftKings tonight for my taste at 7.1. Even Chris Middleton, 6.2 is a little bit too high for me. Is there anybody you're willing to play in this one, or is this stay away and hope nobody goes off for you as well?
I like the Greek Freak on FanDuel. He's shooting guard eligible. He is 6.4K. I think that's a great spot for him in an up-tempo matchup against Denver. Obviously, like you said, 7.1K at a pretty crowded small forward situation on DraftKings. Probably not going to go that route because Rudy Gay is just a little bit more expensive. I'd rather pay up for him. But, I mean, 6.4K shooting guard FanDuel, I really like him there.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's going to be the only place I'm looking at him as well. It's just, like you mentioned, not a chance I'll take the small discount and play him over Rudy Gay tonight. That's not going to happen.
What are you looking at in terms of Will Barton? How many shares of him do you want tonight? Or are you just looking more at a tournament play? Because, I mean, you mentioned consistency, I mean, with his minutes, but I'm really not sure there's such thing as consistency in Denver. I mean, we've seen it time and time before where the rotations are just whack. And actually, I read yesterday that they want to rest their players more moving forward. I don't know if that means, sitting them out random games or just, playing them less minutes in the games. That could feed into Will Barton's prospects because he's a younger guy who's going to get the minutes. He's going to play garbage time if that happens. He's talking more about guys like Kenneth Faried, Ty Lawson, playing less minutes down the stretch. But, I don't know. Will Barton wasn't someone who was originally on my radar, but I just really don't want to become a slave to the game logs where, he's producing at a reasonable clip and he's cheap. But, on DraftKings, Corey Brewer is essentially the same price. And as we mentioned before, we really like his prospects tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I think obviously Corey Brewer the play there. Will Barton, I feel like I should be concerned because, yes, he's coming off the bench, and yes, it is Brian Shaw, but at the same time, I mean, we've seen Brian Shaw kind of voice his frustration with certain players. I mean, even the whole Denver organization. We mentioned Ty Lawson, Kenneth Faried, guys that aren't producing, and I mean, the Nuggets traded Aaron Aflalo out of town. Will Barton came back in for him. Aflalo wasn't producing. Now Barton is producing. So, I mean, maybe I should be more hesitant, but Will Barton's a guy that I like quite a bit right now. And until I see him 20 minutes in one game or really struggle or anything like that or really move out of the rotation, he's a guy I'm still targeting at 3,800. I mean, like I said, Corey Brewer over him, but I think he's a fun play.
I just looked him up on draft day, too, and I think he's a pretty good play there. He's sitting at 7K, and in comparison, Corey Brewer's at 9.2K. So if you want to look at it that way, he's a pretty good filler at shooting guard over there on, one of those sites that has a tight salary cap, and you can go a lot of different ways with your roster in terms of multi-positional eligibility. He's someone to consider probably more over there than DraftKings or FanDuel.
Yeah, I agree. And but I do think he's definitely in play. So if you've got some tournaments, I mean, definitely get yourself some shares because we're looking at 3.8K and 2 of his last 3 games, 34 and 39. I mean, that's almost 10 times salary. So definitely a guy with immense upside at that price tag. I mean, if he was around 5K, be a pretty easy avoid for me outside of a single bullet. But right now, I think it's time to take advantage of that price until we have a reason not to.
Agreed.
All right. Well, anything else you want to add here? I think we're about running out of time here.
Nothing really else. I think we covered it all. It's a nice little modest 7-game slate. I think there's definitely some good value, and you can do a lot of different things with your lineup. So it's a good night to play. I mean, last night kind of looked gross as we neared tip-off, but there's definitely some question marks today. I mean, like we said with the whole Harden situation, but I mean, there's value to be had because of it. So I think this is definitely a good night to be, playing some NBA DFS.
Yeah, 6 to 8 game slate's usually my favorite. So I'm excited about tonight's slate, and a huge one coming up tomorrow too. So I'll be back tomorrow. Spencer will be back with us on Friday. We appreciate you guys hanging out with us.